when they say Africa has too many people, they mean that Africa has too much power and they don't know how to stop it. So they panic.
The major problem of Israel is with the young generation of the black community.
Of reducing population growth, that's this big benefit. The key thing you can do to reduce population growth is actually improve health.
In the developed countries, the big winners are countries that have shrinking populations.
I would like to reduce the number of people on the planet because there's too many of us.
When we invest in clean energy and electric vehicles and reduce population,
Wait. What the?
More of our children can breathe clean air and drink clean water.
What the fuck? Now, the world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that. We're taking things that are, genetically modified organisms, and we're injecting them in little kids' arms. We just shoot them right into the vein.
What the?
So in the next 5 to 10 years, for the next pandemic, we'll solve all those problems.
You say the next pandemic. There will be another pandemic.
Absolutely. We don't know when.
History teaches us that the next pandemic is a matter of when, not if.
We know what's next. We're going to have another major coronavirus pandemic before the end of this decade, before 2030.
If we really want to prevent the next pandemic, and there will be one, there will absolutely be an outbreak of another pandemic. It may be next year.
We need more money to plan for the second pandemic. There's going to be another pandemic.
Family, the white system is in panic. Do you know why? It is because Africa's youth are rising in numbers so fast that the global order, the white order, is trembling. Let me put this in numbers. Today, Africa population is over 1.4 billion. By 2050, it will be close to maybe 2.5 billion. But here is the part that they can't handle. 60% of the population is youth. Youth under 25 years. What does that mean? That means that Africa is the youngest continent on earth, and the average age in Europe right now is around 43 years. Okay? In America, it's almost 40, but in Africa, the average age is 19. So Africa is a teenage compared to the aging West. And that is exactly what terrifies them, because history teaches us this truth. Whoever has the youth has the future. Whoever has the energy, whoever has the creativity, the boldness, the number of the young will dominate the next era. So the white system has relied on numbers for centuries. They colonized with armies, they controlled the economies, they dominated culture, and they built empires on the backs of numbers. But right now, their numbers are shrinking, while ours are multiplying. So Europe is facing population decline. Right now, Japan is shrinking. America depends on immigrants to maintain its workforce. Okay, but Africa is rising like a flood. And this is what their propaganda about overpopulation, that so dangerous. Do you come across the video of Bill Gates and other white people saying they want to reduce population in Africa? They even tried to seduce Kenya to try their so-called vaccination, Because when they say Africa has too many people, what do they really mean? Is that Africa has too much power. That's what they mean. I will repeat that. When they say Africa has too many people, they mean that Africa has too much power and they don't know how to stop it. So they panic. They sponsor health programs aimed at reducing fertility. They push contraceptive in rural villages, even when there is no clean water. They fund families planning campaigns, but not industrialization campaigns. They tell us to have fewer children, but they don't tell us to own our resources. They fear 1 billion African youth united, educated, and standing tall. But the irony here is, they say population growth is a curse. But look at history. The countries that rose to global power, like China and India, rose because of their massive population. Okay? China didn't reduce its numbers, it invested in them. India didn't reduce its numbers, it invested in them. India didn't kill off the youths. It turned them into engineers, into innovators. And now those countries are challenging the very white system that once laughed at them. So why is it different for Africa? Why? Why are they saying that they want to reduce because the population in Africa is dangerous? It's because when Africa rises, it doesn't just challenge, it dismantles. Africa rise means Europe cannot plunder our minerals anymore. Africa rise means America cannot dictate terms anymore. Africa rise means the slave descendants across the oceans reconnect with the motherland and form a power block never seen before in the history. And that's why Bill Gates once said in that infamous TED talk, if you remember that, he said that if we do a really good job with vaccines, with the health and reproductive health, we can reduce population growth. You know, they dress it as a humanitarian something, but let's decode it. They want fewer African babies because they want fewer African leaders and fewer African innovators, and they want fewer African warriors. But family, what they fear is exactly what we must embrace. Our youth are not problem. They are the solution. They are not a burden. They are the blessings. The white system is panicking, but Africa is awakening.
The major problem of Israel is with the young generation of the black community.
You know, I wonder why Israel's biggest problem is the young generation of the black community when we're all the way over here. We don't have no land. We don't have no communities. We don't have no commodities. We don't have any resources. We don't have any bombs. We don't have any nuclear weapons. We don't have any missiles. You know, we don't have any military. You know, why would we be the biggest threat? Wouldn't the biggest threat be the people you're actually in war with? What do we have to do with anything y'all got going on? Could it be that the conspiracies about identity theft are true? Perhaps. Because I doubt that, you know, a lie would be a big threat to an entire country. I don't think a lie would. But what I think is the biggest threat is that the truth is being revealed, and the world knows that. Time's up.
And take this home with you. The Jewish representative of Israel that is in Atlanta said that the greatest difficulty that Israel has is with young black Americans. What does Israel have to fear about young black Americans? Because they refuse to be controlled by the forces that control their fathers and their grandfathers. That is over. So I say to Israel, leave the black youth alone. Don't come into our community trying to kill us to satisfy your bloodlust. Turn my young black brothers over to the nation of Islam. We'll take them and teach them and civilize them. Thank you for listening, and may Allah bless you with a happy, happy Savior's Day. Assalamu alaikum.
The number of babies in the world goes down a tiny bit every year of the century, but its mix goes from being 25% in Africa to 50% in Africa. And so Africa goes from 1 billion people to 4 billion people. So when we get to 11 billion, we're at 7 now, most of the increment is in Africa. The rest is the aging Asians living longer, that they go from 4 to 5 billion. And so in this report, we say, look, that's great, we got to 9%, but we could stay at 9% for the next 30 years unless we do a lot of really good investments in health and education and governance in Africa.
You raised an alarm through a letter you transmitted to the National Assembly, the Senate specifically. And in that letter, you touched the whole world. You copied the UN, you copied ILO, you copied the Conference of Bishops in Africa, Asia, Europe. You touched everywhere in the world. And you talked about a planned genocide of doctors in Nigeria. It's very disturbing. Can you explain or expand on that and let us know what is happening really?
What the West is looking at is that the envisage a new human industry. The new human industry will make it possible to replace organ parts of sick people instead of continuously taking drugs for any medical condition. So what that means is that if you have a heart disease and you go to a doctor, the doctor will could take a sample from that your diseased heart, send it to the biotech companies, which are actually most of them in this category are owned by Bill Gates. They will now clone exactly that heart of that person. And how will they do this? They will take the cell the doctor sent them and remove the nuclear material, that's the nucleus that has all the genetic information. Now, they will get the egg of a woman, or eggs of women, because they will need several eggs for this. They will remove the nucleus on that egg and then transfer the nucleus from that disease heart into that egg. So that's what we call somatic cell nuclear transfer. So when they transfer it and then they keep it in a culture to grow into a heart, replicating the exact heart of that diseased person. But now that heart will be brand new without disease. They can now send that heart back to the doctor and they will now implant it into the patient. And of course the person must have paid maybe $2 million or $1 million or whatever the cost involved. But this process of doing this is a manual process. That means making this transfer into the egg of a woman. So the eggs of women could be taken in hundreds just to do one procedure. So they will need about 100 million eggs, which will come from 10 million women. So when they looked at the map of the world and saw where on earth can we get up to 10 million women to donate egg?
Okay.
The planned genocide is restricted to Nigeria. But one has to understand, why do they need to kill the doctors? They kill the farmers because they wanted to make sure they eliminate all the seed growers in the country. So when they eliminate the seed growers, the natural seeds will never be available again. And how they did that was very simple. What they did was that they just gave 14 million cell phones to all Nigerian farmers, so they could track those people who were being paid for seeds. So when other farmers go to them, they go to buy seeds, and then they know that this person was being paid for seeds, so he's the one selling the seeds. So they now use the GPS coordinates on these so-called electronic wallets, which are just cell phones, to target all of them and eliminate them. When you eliminate the natural seed growers, there will be no other alternative to the GMO, genetically modified organisms, foods and seeds. So they brought these seeds as improved seeds. The other farmers, they drove them into IDP camps and came to these IDP camps under the different NGOs and international agencies and presented these GMO seeds. So the farmers will now leave, they will temporarily halt their military activities in those areas, so the farmers will go and resettle. When they resettle, they start planting the GMO seeds. Once you plant the GMO seeds that first time, that first seed you get from that your maize, if you eat it, that will be the last you are going to eat. Because if you take the seed from that GMO corn and plant it, it will not grow. The gene that allows replication has been switched off. So you have to go back to the person who produced the initial seed. That is, in this case in Nigeria, it will be Monsanto. Between 2015 and 2018, 37,500 victims were killed by Boko Haram. These were farmers. Then of these 37,500, 32,000, that's 85% were Muslims. 5,500 were Christians. And in states like Zamfara, 60% of the victims were Hausa, 40% were Fulani. So it became clear that this has nothing to do with Islamic terrorism. It has to do with elimination of all the seed growers. Now they have eliminated the seed growers. Now they're moving into the second phase of their program. Now, when the farmers go to them, now we now depend exclusively on the GMOs.
Okay. So you mean we now depend on GMOs right now?
Exactly.
Okay.
Because without the GMOs, you cannot really get seeds, unless we are getting seeds from different African countries and some places. Some places in the south, especially southwest, and some parts of southeast, we can still get our own seeds because the Boko Haram have not really infiltrated them. But they are trying to do that. The next phase is whereby they will have total monopoly of the seeds, and then they will tell the farmers, you want us to give you seed? Okay, we can give you seed, but on the premise that you must tell your wife and daughters to go and donate their ovarian eggs. And why do they have to do that? They have to do that because the Western countries need these ovarian eggs for cloning. And when he called us, and I must say, I was physically present when Bill Gates called us through the General Electric, who he awarded the contract to build 260 hospitals in Nigeria, so that it will be at these his hospitals they will be harvesting these organs and harvesting these eggs. So he will now take us out of the health sector. He invited the leaders in the private health sector and said, okay, look, I'm ready to offer you money to leave the healthcare sector. We told him before the executives of GE that he is mad and insane to demand such a thing.
To leave medical practice.
That we should leave medical practice, and then he will pay us, no matter the amount of dollars we ask for. So we said, you are mad. We are not going to do that, and to hell with you.
Is that really?
We told him off before the executives of, I was personally present. The lab people, the president and secretaries of the lab, National Organization of the Laboratory Scientists was there. The president and secretary of the community pharmacists was there. And we told him to his face, to his presence, because they were talking on, it was a telecom conference, and then the executives of General Electric were there at their headquarters in Abuja. So we told him off that you cannot do that, even with all your money and all your thing, it's not going to be possible. Now, since we rejected that offer, he has moved to his second option.
Okay,
eliminate, kill all these doctors, and then take over the health care. And he told us they have already taken off the whole government hospitals. They bought the federal medical centers, they bought the university teaching hospitals.
Okay, so let's not be fooled. This panic about African youth didn't start yesterday. It has a deep roots in colonial history. Okay, and when the colonizers came, they didn't just steal land and minerals. No, they also controlled the wombs of African women. They controlled who could reproduce, who could not reproduce, how many children were allowed, and even separated families from slavery, through slavery. So it is happening. So think about the transatlantic slave trade back then. Millions of Africans were stolen, and yet even in chains, Africans multiplied in the America. Okay, white slave owners panicked about slave uprising because numbers mean rebellion, and that's why they imposed breeding controls, separating men from women and using women's bodies as property. Population control was always about power. It's always about power. So right now, when we fast forward, not right now, but when we fast forward to colonial era in Africa in the 20th century, European powers began to talk about the population problem. They feared that too many Africans would demand freedom, so they brought in programs disguised as development aid. They gave out birth control, but they never gave out ownership of railways, ownership of mines, ownership of banks. They just wanted fewer Africans, but not free Africans. And in the 1990s, or not 90s, it was 1970s, something called the Kissinger Report came out in America, and it openly said that African population growth was a national security threat to the West because a young Africa could rise and challenge Western access to resources. And they wrote it down in black and white that numbers of Africans scare them. It is the truth. It is called Kissinger Report or Kissinger Report. You see, this is history repeating itself. Even today, when you look at the global NGOs, they push condoms and pills before they push industrialization and technology. They hand out family planning kits before they hand out computers. Do you know why? Because their goal is not to empower African youth. Their goal is to manage and reduce African youth. Okay? The truth is that they can't suppress. No matter how many programs they push, Africa's numbers keep rising, and every birth is a blessing. Every young African is a potential revolutionary. Every new generation is another wave in the ocean, and that's about to drown the white system. Kings and queens, there's a psychology behind the fear. Why does the white system panic so much about African youths? Why do they lose sleep when they see a continent full of children, teenagers, and young adults? Why? We'll go right into it. It's because they know numbers don't just represent people. Numbers represent power. And power is in the hands of Africa. Or power in the hands of Africa means that the collapse of everything the West has built through centuries of theft, centuries of exploitation. You understand that? So the average African is 19 years old. That means that the continent is alive with energy, creativity, strength, and potential. And meanwhile, the average European is in their 40s. They are aging, they are tired, they are declining. Their future workforce is shrinking. Their pension systems are collapsing. Their militaries are struggling to recruit. So when they look at Africa, they don't just see of black power. They see the possibility that Africa will do what Asia did, rise and challenge global dominance. But unlike Asia, Africa carries something more powerful. History of enslavement, a legacy of colonization, and a fire for liberation. That's what we carry as Africans. And this is what the white system's nightmare. Okay? A youthful, united Africa filled with young people who are consciousness of their history, aware of their oppression, and ready to reclaim their destiny. That is why they pour billions into shaping the mind of Africans' youth through media, through education system designed to oppress the minds. They are designed by the colonial templates, through NGOs that tell us to control our fertility instead of controlling our resources. That's what they are doing. But here's the crack in the system. Africans' youth are waking up. They are no longer buying into the lies. Look around today. Young Africans are leading protests, organizing movements, coding apps, building businesses, and even taking political power. See what's happening in Burkina Faso, in Kenya, in Nigeria, South Africa. The youngs are rising, and the white system fears rebellion. Okay? White system fears rebellion, but they fear something even greater. Okay? They fear organization. If African youth simply rebel, the system can crush rebellions. But if African youths unite, if African youths organize, it will be more of what they think. What made me talk about this topic is the Bill Gates vaccines and the language of control. Back then, I think it was in 2010, he was in TED Talk. Gates said something that has been quoted and misquoted all over the world. Okay, he said that if we do a really great job on a new vaccine, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower population growth. Okay. Now, literally, when you listen carefully, it did not say that we want to kill people or unalive people. Okay. But he did say that better health will reduce growth. So the logic is this: if children survive, families will choose to have fewer. That sounds good on a surface, but ask yourself, on the surface that sounds good, but ask yourself this one question: why is population reduction always targeted to Africa and other so-called developing regions? Why not Europe? Why birth rates are collapsing? Why not America, where obesity, where diseases and drugs epidemics are raging? Why not Europe, where birth rates are collapsing? Think of it. It is because the white system does not view Africans youth as children who need opportunity. They view them as a problem. They must be managed. They see Africa as a mine for resources, not a continent of people with rights and power. And every African child represents a future leader who might say no. If they could have controlled Ibrahim Traore, he could not come out and say no. So that is fear. Okay? And so population control becomes the hidden agenda. Aid comes with strings attached too. Okay, loans from the World Bank come with conditions. Even health programs comes with a silent purpose. Fewer African children, slow African growth, Let me ask you this. Why is it that billions are spent on birth control programs in Africa, but very little is spent on building industries? Why? Why is it priority reducing numbers instead of building capacity? Because the white system doesn't want Africa strong. They want Africa small, dependent, and easy to exploit. Here is where they fail. Numbers are not their enemy. Numbers are our power. Vaccines, aid, and family planning cannot erase the destiny of a continent rising. Africa is not dying. Africa is multiplying, and every child born is a new brick in the house of African liberation. Let's take lessons from Asia. When you look at Asia, in the 1960s and 1970s, Western experts said the same thing about Asia that they now say about Africa right now. They said that Asia was doomed by overpopulation. They said too many people meant poverty, famine, and instability. But what happened? Countries like China, India, South Korea, Indonesia turned their population, their massive population, into engineers, into power, into growth. China, with over 1 billion people, became the factory of the world. India, with its youth, became the IT hub of the world. South Korea turned its young people, hungry generation, into innovators and creators of global brands like Samsung and Hyundai. They didn't see numbers as a curse. They saw them as a workforce, as consumers, as future army of builders. And today, Asia stands tall, challenging the West economically, politically, and culturally. Now ask yourself, why are they telling Africa to do the opposite? Why are they telling us to reduce our numbers instead of investing in them? Because they know if Africa follows the same path, it will not just challenge the West, but it will dethrone it. Imagine Africa with 2.5 billion people, most of them young, educated, and connected. Imagine Africa producing its own technology, building its own industries, running its own banks, and uniting under a single vision. That's not just a challenge to white system. That is the end of the white system. And that's why they panic. Okay? I'll say this. I want to explain something here powerful called the demographic dividend. This is it's the moment when a country has more working age people than dependents, meaning more workers than children and elderly. It is like a sweet spot in population growth that drives economic boom. Right now, Africa is approaching this point. Our youths are entering working age faster than ever. So if we invest in education, jobs, and industry, the generation or this one that is here can create a wave of prosperity unlike anything seen before. Okay? But here's the catch. If Africa fails to create opportunity, or if Africa fails to create opportunity, the same youth could face unemployment. They could face poverty, instability. And that's what the white system hopes for. They don't want Africa to reach the demographic dividend. They want Africa to stuck in chaos so that our youth are seen as a burden, not a blessing. But the prophecy said, you can never stop a rising empire. A prophecy, okay? You can't control it. The choice is ours. We can let outsiders tell us our youths are too many, or we can embrace them as our greatest strength. And that's why we want leaders who are investing into youths. We want leaders who are seeing youths as the leaders of tomorrow, investing in youth through education, innovations, putting companies here and there, creating favorable environment for our youths to create businesses so that we can succeed. I know with what is happening right now in the white American, in the Europe countries, the economic crisis and everything, we need to take this moment. As they fall, we need to step and rise up. That's all we can do. That's all we can do, because as I say, this is a prophetic moment. The white system is panicking, and they see the numbers, they see the trends, they see the rise, and they know their time is short. They are terrified of African youths because they know the history has always shown when the oppressed rise in numbers and in consciousness, empire fall. The prophecy was what they call population crisis is actually the liberation blessings. What they call overpopulation is actually divine multiplication. So every African child born is not a statistic. They are a soldier of destiny, a builder of nations. The system may try to reduce us, but they cannot stop us. Okay? So tell me what you think about that video. Do you think the way I think? Comment down there. Until next episode, peace out.